Hello and welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. My name is Brianna and over there is Courtney.
Hello. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's social media. There's this thing. You can go online, check it out. We're on all of it. It's weird. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter at Murder Dictionary Podcast on all of these social media sources.
Platforms.
We're
on multi-platform.
We're multi-platform.
If you do follow us already, I mean, I highly recommend that you do. But one of the things that we posted this week was that we put out last week a Patreon episode on our regular feed because I was sick and it was Courtney's birthday. So if you liked that episode, you kind of got a good idea of what's going on our Patreon feed. We were just discussing what we're going to do for our next episode. So I am pretty stoked to dive into that case too. So if you want to be on our Patreon, you can join at patreon.com/Murder Dictionary Podcast. And we've got a few new people that are on there this week. We want to say thank you to our new patrons, Rick, Cleo, Laurel, Caroline, and Nick.
Thank you.
So thanks, you guys. And we hope that you really like that Patreon episode so that you kind of know what's going on over on our page.
It's also beach towel season.
Dude, it's so beach. You're about to take a beach trip. So everybody needs to get beach towels, like straight up B-52's Rock Lobster style.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Everybody
on
had
Threadless,
matching towels.
On our Threadless, you can find these beach towels. Duffel bags. Cool stuff. Shopping, the reusable shopping bags. I can't stop. We're coming up. It will be hoodie season soon.
Dude.
It's
everyone
muscle
got
tank.
their hoodies out.
It's muscle tank time right now. Okay.
So with all that said, let's jump into a new letter. We're starting letter J for Jailhouse Murders.
Very exciting.
This is going to be an interesting topic because we're going to really try and come at it from a few different angles and give a few different examples of cases that involve jailhouse murders. And what we're going to start with is a name that might be familiar to you guys. It's Christopher Scarver. And you may have heard of him. It should sound familiar because he actually killed Jeffrey Dahmer. So we're going to dive into his story and his life and what happened with that case.
If you don't know who Jeffrey Dahmer is, this may not be the place for you.
Right.
It's just a side note. Like if you're not familiar with it, you're like, who is that? That's strange.
Then what are you doing?
I don't know why you're here.
This?
Yeah. I don't know what you're doing here.
So most of you have probably heard that name. This week, we're just going to dive into that. So one of the huge sources that we used for this week was an interview that he gave to the New York Post. So we will put the link to that in our show notes and try and post it on social media so that you guys can go read that for yourself as well. Those links are always available. If you want to do extra reading, like we always say, just check out our show notes. So let's get into Christopher Scarver, who was born July 6, 1969 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He came from a really large, tight-knit family, and he was the second of 5 children. It's a whole lot of kids.
That's a lot. And it's Midwest, Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm. School was not easy for Chris, and it was a challenge for him to maintain even mediocre grades. By all accounts, it was really a struggle to him to be a C average student, you know?
I always felt really bad for that kid.
Yeah, I know.
I knew those people, you know, and I always just feel really bad. Like all the extra work you have to put in just to get, you know, like a C, like you were saying.
Right. By all accounts, like he wanted to do well. He was trying, but that was just what his level was, you know? Unfortunately, as hard as he could try, it was just average grades.
I don't know if this is good. I'm 5 seconds in like, oh.
I know, feeling bad for him already.
Oh, let's die.
And that's one of the things about this story is like, I do feel bad for his entire backstory, to be honest. Like school in general was hard for him. But on top of that, it was extra challenging for him because he had a lot of trouble with kids at his school. He endured a lot of racial tension and discrimination beginning from childhood, which deeply affected the rest of his life. So because he was struggling with all the emotions of all this discrimination and racial issues, he would try to distract himself from everything that was bothering him. And what he ended up doing was just chasing girls and partying to just escape the reality of what was going on.
It's either going to be one of two things. You're going to be chasing girls and the partying, or you go into sports.
Right. You got to find some sort of outlet, you know?
Or you just or burn out and smoke a ton of weed and do none of those things. You're just on a couch. But this is the early 90s. We don't necessarily have the video games we did then. So he's chasing girls and partying.
Yep.
Okay.
I guess whatever works. It wasn't long before his grades began to slip even further and he fell behind in his classes. So in addition to his grades getting worse, he also had disciplinary issues and he really couldn't seem to stay out of trouble with his teachers. By 11th grade, it became clear that he wasn't really going to be able to finish along with his classmates, so he decided to drop out.
It's a bummer.
It is. And again, it's like, I don't want to sympathize with him, but I do feel for him. Like he's trying his best. It's hard enough for him. Then he's got all this additional stuff going on socially with kids being shitty to him because of his race. And now, like, what else? What other choice? I would make the same choice. I'd give up, you know?
But even further to this is going to be a circular thing because you didn't finish high school. So from the future, now, from the outset, you're going to have trouble anything you want to do.
Right.
No matter what you want to do now. I mean, you know, aside from like Dairy Queen. But you know what I'm saying? It's going to be harder for him in the future with no diploma, no GED, nothing.
Right.
That's just going to make this worse for him. So like, where's he? He's going to soar to new heights now? Yeah. Tell us where he's going to go.
I know. I feel bad. It's going to be a difficult road for him. It started off difficult. Things were challenging. And then, you know, dropping out of school guarantees that it's going to be harder. It's really sad.
People can turn things around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not every murderer, you know, not every person becomes a killer, right? That goes through these things. But he didn't do that.
But you can see where it's kind of like the roadmap is set up for a certain path, you know? So when he didn't have to spend time going to school, he began to drink and get high with friends even more often. His mother, of course, got really tired of trying to keep him out of trouble. And on top of that, she felt like he was a really bad influence on his younger siblings. So she's got to look out for them, you know? She decided to kick him out of the house in hopes that he would turn over a new leaf and she could prevent her other children from following his example.
I'm not hating on her for this.
No, I get it.
At all.
There's 5 kids. You're trying to it's hard enough to raise that many kids. So you want to give them the best opportunity to succeed.
You dropped out of high school, right? You're an adult now. You're living your adult life. I got kids. Get out of here.
Right. You made an adult decision.
Yeah. Now live with it.
But the problem is it couldn't have been worse timing because Christopher just found out that his girlfriend was pregnant.
Oh.
Not good.
Not good.
So he did try and kind of turn things around. He wanted to get on his feet, provide a better life for his child. So he looked for a job that would provide the kind of stability that he needed for their future. He found a position as a trainee carpenter under the Wisconsin Conservation Corps job program. When he was hired, his supervisor, Edward Patz, had explained to him that the job would become permanent when he completed his apprenticeship.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this all looks great. I'm sure him, his family, his baby's mother, everybody was excited for him.
I'm sorry, I keep getting so excited. I would bet his mom is like, oh, okay, this is great. Sure, come on over for dinner once in a while now that you're not terrifying me and the kids anymore. Things are probably looking up.
Well, she probably also felt justified in her actions. Like, I protected the kids and I also provided consequences for you so that you could reach some sort of kind of quote bottom where you had to change, right? So she's like, yeah, I did the right thing. Everything's looking up. Unfortunately, his original supervisor was let go, and nobody else had really promised him a permanent job after his apprenticeship. So where were they to go from there? So once Edward was let go, Chris didn't hear anything else about becoming a full-time employee. The conversation just ended. Once his temporary position was over, Christopher was not hired. And he felt like the supervisors may have made their decision based on his race.
I mean, I guess that's possible, but they may not have even just been aware of the fact that he thought he was in line for it. So he might not have been talking about it because he's like, oh, I don't have to talk to them about it. They already know.
It's a given.
It's a given that this apprentice becomes an employee. But they might have just been like, oh, we'll just wait till he finishes his apprenticeship and then we're good. I mean, but they also could have been hardcore white supremacist racists that, well, we can't have this guy here. But it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, we can't really say because we don't know, but really anything seems possible. His life experience has told him that people are going to discriminate against him. And I can't fault him for that. Like, if that's been his experience, which it obviously has, then he would feel like that's what's going on. And we don't know that that's not true. But we also don't know what was going on in the job program at that time. So it could just be a lack of communication. It could be racial tension. We don't know. Or they just didn't need people. Who knows?
I mean, yeah, it could just be that easy. I mean, either way, you didn't get the job.
Right. And of course, it's extremely upsetting for someone that desperately needs this permanent position. So he blamed the new management for the whole ordeal. And he especially blamed the site manager, John P. Fayen, for discriminating against him. And I don't know of any incidents specifically that happened between the site manager and him beforehand, but there was something that told him that that was the problem, that this person had made a racial decision. So after becoming unemployed, he fell into a downward spiral. He began to drink 340s a day and started to smoke weed constantly.
Jesus.
Yeah. Over time, he became more obsessively resentful about losing his job. The fact that he was unwelcome at his family home and had no way to support himself or his new child sent him on a further downward spiral. It was getting bad.
I mean, the other, I'm like, you're not buying diapers, but you're buying 340s old E every day. Somehow you've got that money. Mom doesn't want you in the house. And like, I mean, it just seems like he wants to be close, but then he does these things and gets pushed away. It's not their fault. So for this downward spiral, I mean, you've kind of created this.
Right.
Now you got to live with it. And that's like the theme with him.
Yeah, I just think that he has to be accountable for his own decisions. He's got to think about the fact that he's got a child on the way. But for him, he's always used the coping mechanism of drugs and alcohol and blaming other people.
Yeah.
And to some extent, of course, it has to be partially true that other people are discriminating against him, looking at the time period and, knowing that that had to be a factor that he's experienced. But there's ways to overcome that, I think, that he wasn't willing to do. Does that make sense? Sorry. Like, I think that in his position, you can choose to handle things a certain way. And he chose, let's get high, let's get drink, and let's be really angry about it. Instead of like, okay, cool, that didn't work out. I'm going to go find the next opportunity because there's a million other places to work. So it's just sad that he made that decision. On June 1st, 1990, 19-year-old Christopher went to the Wisconsin Conservation Corps office hoping to confront the site manager, John P. Fayen.
He's only 19, by the way.
I know. Youngster.
It's wild. He can't even legally drink.
It sucks. It's, obviously he's making really bad decisions and a lot of us wouldn't choose the route that he chose.
He's young and dumb.
But he's also just got no coping mechanisms. He's been discriminated against and he's just acting out because things have been awful for him. And he chose to handle it in the worst way possible, So when he showed up, he was surprised to find that the new replacement supervisor, Steve Lohman, was also in the office. So he ordered him to lay face down on the floor. Christopher claimed that he was owed money and he demanded cash from John. When he emptied his wallet and showed that he only had $15 to offer, Christopher shot Steve in the head. After the first shot, he told Steve, quote, "Now do you think I'm kidding? I need more money." So John wrote him a check for $3,000 and handed it to him. But Chris still shot Steve twice more, even though he was given money.
That's wild.
I know. John Fayen was able to break free and run away, but Steve Lohman was pronounced dead at the scene.
I mean, of course, Steve. But then imagine being John. That's a crazy thing to just go through, right?
Yes. And he was trying to save this person. Here, let me write you a check. I'll do whatever it takes. What do you need? I've got you. Let's diffuse this situation. And still, he's like, I have the money in my hand, but I'm going to shoot him 2 more times. That's whoa.
Yeah. And this super young kid just comes in and demands it. And they might not even know him that well,
Right.
At least Steve, he's the new guy.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Christopher fled, but was arrested a few hours later, just sitting on the stoop of his girlfriend's apartment building. In his pockets, the police found the check, a credit card, and the .25 caliber semi-auto pistol that had been used as the murder weapon. When he was apprehended, he explained to the arresting officers that he planned to turn himself in because he knew what he did was wrong. It seems crazy to me that he just has that moment of clarity that he didn't have before. You knew it was wrong. I don't know what he wanted to accomplish, why are you going to do it anyway? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
What I think is kind of interesting about this is that his girlfriend lives in an apartment building. So she has no connection with his mom, right? But she's obviously living maybe with her family, but he's not allowed there because he doesn't live there. So he has multiple homes he's not allowed in to live at, right? Because if he would just live there with her, with the family, right? It's the father of the child. I mean, what are you doing? So he has definitely been on this, has he put his own downward spiral? It feels, there's just a few clues here that are sprinkled throughout the past here. And he doesn't come out and say things, but just there's certain things that it's oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of people are creating distance between him and them. It's the work situation, it's his home, it's his girlfriend's family. Nobody really wants Christopher around.
No.
And it's hard to tell if that's entirely his behavior. Yeah, you're an addict and an alcoholic and we can't really have that around our family or in our workplace or whatever. Or if it really is just people being shitty to him or discriminating or whatever. We just don't know. But it does seem like a lot of people are taking the same stance with him.
Either way, he's going to say people are being shitty to him.
Yeah.
So
Christopher said, "I don't know what came over me. I was never in any trouble with the law, never in a fight with anyone." So he didn't have a history of violence. It really did seem to come out of nowhere, And I don't really have any information about like toxicology reports or anything. Did he just get too wasted and do something terrible? I don't know. But it seems like immediately after he had a lot of clarity. It didn't seem like he was fucked up a little while later when he was just on the stairs waiting, you know?
Yeah, he might have just been obliterated drunk, just wasted or just like on drugs, and then wears off and he's just like, what have I done?
Yeah.
Sobered up quick.
It was a long 2 years before the trial got underway, and Chris was extremely concerned about what would happen to him. He told a psychiatrist that he expected to spend the rest of his life in prison. When the psychiatrist asked if life in prison would be a just fate for him, Chris responded, quote, "Nothing white people do to blacks is just." It's hard to reconcile the fact that he's obviously had legitimate experiences of discrimination and racism, and this is a very real thing. But then he also has some mental health issues. So even though those things are real, he was also complaining about delusions and hearing voices. You know what I mean? It's really sad because you don't want to discredit the kind of racial tension that he was experiencing and the things that he was obviously victimized by. But unfortunately, he also has this aspect of not being 100% sober, 100% coherent, 100% healthy mentally. And so then it calls into question what he's experiencing. And I never want to question what someone is experiencing because of their race or gender or any of, because of their category of who they are, whatever. I just don't want to put that into question. However, he was clearly struggling with mental health issues.
And I wonder if he just never had come in contact with like a psychiatrist or psychologist or anything before. And so he never said anything.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're hearing voices, generally people are aware of that. Somebody, you say something to somebody along the way. Mm-hmm. This one, it's like nothing. And then just, I hear voices and like very descriptive things.
Right. And it's 1990 where there isn't a lot of dialogue about mental health, and he's 19 at a prime age where a lot of these mental health issues can start to really show,
yes,
like we've talked about. So there's a lot of validity to what he's experienced, and feeling upset that his employer may have discriminated against him is absolutely justified. But then you add in this element that he is, not really emotionally well, doesn't have any treatment or diagnosis for his mental health issues that are just starting to show. And he's got addiction and substance abuse on top of that. It's just a recipe for disaster. The legitimate issues that he's experiencing, plus the extra hardships that he's causing himself and poor decisions he's making, it's just really led to the worst possible outcome. And someone died, So when he started being more open about the delusions and voices that were actually happening, he also claimed that he was the chosen one and he was guided by God. Christopher explained that his actions were for the good of mankind and that he was an instrument of God. So even though right after the crime actually happened, he seemed to have some handle on knowing it was wrong and feeling regretful, right? And then once he was in prison, he was like, no, I was justified. I was doing the right thing. I heard voices. They told me to do this and I did it.
Yeah, that's really bizarre.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So he also said the voices had told him that he was the son of God and, quote, told me to do what I'm here for today.
He's got a lot of roles here. Like he's given himself a lot of, I am the this. And like there's a lot of different things that he's given himself a lot of responsibility from above. You know what I'm saying? Like he's assigned specific. You are the chosen one, and then you're the son of God. And like some of these could be the same thing, but it's also very like specific different things. It's kind of strange, but I mean, we can't really make sense of it, but interesting.
The voices were described as a family, which included a woman, a man, a little girl, and a boy. The voices had told him, quote, everything was going to be all right, and it was meant to happen like this.
Is that some self-soothing?
I guess, trying to like make sense of it. It's going to be okay. I just need to get this done, and then
and there's a family
because
you don't really have a family. And so there's a family telling you it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like self-soothing. Can't ask him. I don't know.
Chris told psychiatrists that he did not want to go to a mental hospital because he was afraid that the doctors would turn him into a vegetable. So the voices instructed him to go to prison instead.
Oh, so this is why he did it. There was a reason.
It's just, it didn't seem to come out right away, but it came out later.
After he
which
talked to
I don't
an attorney.
know if that means that like around this time, his mental health issues are showing and growing. And now all of a sudden he's got a new lens to look at it from. I don't know. Or if he always felt that way and didn't say it from the beginning, you know? A prison psychiatrist diagnosed him with schizophrenia, and he began receiving mental health treatment. He was prescribed antipsychotics, but had not really shown a lot of improvement despite consistently taking his medication. Although he had treatment and meds, he attempted suicide twice, once by setting himself on fire.
It's intense.
I know. It's another just like he's in a prison of his own mind. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just a horror movie that he's living through. He just wants to get out. Christopher pled not guilty by reason of mental disease, but psychiatrists could not agree on whether he was competent to stand trial. In 1992, Christopher was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison.
Something interesting. And this is just me being the devil's advocate, okay? It took 2 years to bring this to trial. Over this period of time, he now has schizophrenia. It is interesting that they note that even though he is taking his medication, he shows no signs of improvement, which could make a defense or a prosecutor say, well, he's faking it. That's why, right? And then he sets himself on fire and tries to kill himself. Like, okay, wait, maybe there's an issue. But then after these 2 years of waiting and doing all this, now he wants to plead insanity. And these 2 years has just been him showing you that he's insane. But prior to that, he had none of these issues. At least, now again, I'm being the devil's advocate. I'm not believing everything I'm saying. But then at the same time, it's like he probably never had any psychiatrist talk to him. Didn't have anybody asking the right questions. Might have been acting out because of these things. Again, it usually doesn't show itself in men until, late teens, early 20s. We're on track. But there is a lot here for making him guilty. I mean, you know what I mean? He's not going to, I think they couldn't agree because both of these arguments are very valid, depending on who you get on what day.
And I think also it's just like we know through the entire thing, whether there's mental health at play or not, whether there's substance abuse or not, all of that aside, he still from day one has said, yes, I did it. So you have to hold him accountable. There's no question of let's prove that he did it, Also, if they find him not guilty by reason of insanity, what's the right place for him? They probably felt like, well, let's at least keep him somewhere where the public is safe, So yeah, it's hard because there are some signs where it's just like, is he faking it? But I don't really believe that. Just looking at his behavior and the long history of suicide attempts, and there's just no way. There's no way.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
There's definitely mental disturbance issue. Things are happening.
But for the psychiatrists, it's kind of like it's their job to suss that out. So they're really trying to be diligent on figuring out what's really going on. And in 1990, there's a lot of skepticism, even amongst the mental health community, I think.
Yeah.
Of just like, yeah, let's not say that about people. Let's just hold them accountable for crimes. That's it. After his conviction, he was sent to the Columbia Correctional Institute in Portage, Wisconsin. That same year, Jeffrey Dahmer was also sent to the same facility as Chris after a jury sentenced him to 16 terms of life imprisonment. And of course, we know Jeffrey Dahmer was never destined to have an easy time in prison. His case got a ton of media coverage. Everyone knew him when he arrived at the prison.
And at this point in time in the prison, I looked it up, it said that there was about 1,573 people in this prison.
Oof. That's a lot of people to want to kill you.
No kidding, right?
You know, I mean, as soon as he walked in, people knew who he was and they hated him. He had a target on his back. Like everyone in the civilian world, his fellow prisoners were deeply disturbed by the stories of
Introducing the Capital One Walmart Rewards Card. Earn unlimited 5% back on everything you buy at Walmart online. It's the perfect card for all your family's hints this holiday season. Like 5% back on the air fryer Grandpa told you about when he fell asleep in his chair.
They don't fry anything.
Or 5% back on the laptop your sister had carolers sing to you.
2 turtle doves and a laptop for Carrie.
The Capital One Walmart Rewards Card. Earn unlimited rewards, including 5% back at Walmart online. What's in your wallet?
Terms and exclusions apply. Capital One N.A.
The Starlight Lounge presents An Evening with the Progressive Box.
Old moon, yeah. That's Hugo, tickling the ivories. He just saved by bundling home and auto with Progressive. Gonna finally buy a ring for that gal of yours, Hugo? Send her my condolences. Hi-oh! This next one's for you two. There's a burglar in my heart. Thank you.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
how his victims were dismembered and cannibalized. And Dahmer also, of course, had an extra target on his back because he'd been a sexual predator. And there had been a racial element to his crimes.
Not good.
So, yeah.
And some of them were really young, too.
During Dahmer's first year in the Columbia Correctional Institution, he'd agreed to be kept in solitary confinement in order to protect him from the general population. After a year of being kept in isolation, Jeffrey became restless and he decided to leave solitary. And reportedly, he told his family members that he didn't care what happened to him because basically he'd become born again and he knew he'd be going to a better place.
I wonder how long he thought he would be okay. Because obviously he had thought about, okay, I'm going to get murdered today. But I wonder if he figured like, I'll be all right. I'm 6'5" or something crazy. He's huge. Jeffrey Dahmer was enormous, by the way, like as just a tall guy, right? So maybe he was like, oh, I can fight him off for a little while. I just wonder how long he thought he would be okay.
Yeah, it's hard to put yourself in that position of what you would tell yourself to make you feel comfortable, right? To be like, oh, I can walk around here and feel safe.
I mean, he's telling his family, like, I'm born again. It's cool. If I die, I'll go to heaven. So obviously he's thought about this. But like, I don't know. I think weird things.
Once he was in Gen Pop, Dahmer had at least one corrections officer guarding him at all times because there was clearly a lot of tension between him and his fellow inmates. Christopher didn't pay a lot of attention to Dahmer, but many of the other inmates were clearly bothered by having him around. And Dahmer did himself no favors since he would actively instigate things with his fellow inmates. And we've all heard stories. If you're familiar with Dahmer, there's a lot of information about how he behaved behind bars. He would reportedly use his food to make fake severed body parts and cover them in ketchup to mimic blood. Dahmer would even leave these like mini food crime scenes around for his fellow inmates to randomly find.
If this was now, he would have one of those Instagram channels of the little tiny food. Right? But it would be like blood, ketchup,
Bacon mini muffins.
Exactly. Oh, I'd follow it. I follow all those little tiny food things. I make little baby sushi that's like a 16th of an inch. That is impressive.
You're right. It's such a like weird thing, but it's got to be oddly therapeutic for him. He's just like, yeah, I'm just processing these things through food.
I have always, honestly, like still, even as we're reading it right now, there's always been part of me that really doesn't believe any of that because it's so theatrical to me that I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This guy murdered all these people, did all this. He knows he's going to get killed, and now he's leaving baby crime scenes of food around too. This can't be real. But I mean, realistically, why wouldn't it be?
Right.
He murdered a ton of people and kept them in his fridge and ate them and stuff and all of it, right? Like, why is it strange that he plays with his food? This is the least.
That's where he draws the line, Court.
Oh, that's it. Manners at the table. But what the fuck, right? It's always just intrigued me, the things that like Dahmer chose to do to bother people in prison. And it's true. I guess it's true.
Yeah, it's interesting just because we don't have accounts from him, but it seems like enough people that were fellow inmates and correction officers have come forward to say that his behavior was odd, that he alienated himself, that he did things to provoke people. And, you know, like I said before, I mean, a lot of this information about Christopher Scarver comes from a New York Post article where he was interviewed, but he's not the only one that's come forward to say that there were incidents, you know, that a lot of people were against him and targeting him because of his behavior. And on some level, yes, it makes me question, like you said, what people are saying, if it's true. But then if I move past that and see that a lot of people have said the same thing, then I'm like, well, what was he thinking? You know, like, was he ready to go and just hoping someone would take him out? I don't want to believe that that's the case, but if he's really trying to provoke people the way that so many witnesses have said, then maybe he wanted trouble. Maybe he wanted someone to come for him, or I don't know. Or maybe he thought that that was a way to prove himself. Like, if people come for me and I beat them up, then they'll respect me. But it seems like he's got to have a reason for doing that.
Yeah, like what's the end game?
Yeah.
I feel like we could do an entire episode just about us going back and forth on theories of what Jeffrey Dahmer was making baby food.
The Dahmer chicken nugget episode.
Yeah, no, completely. This could be Patreon. Like, I'm not even kidding. I have all these different thoughts and ideas of what the long con is and even what the short con is. I also don't think there is a con. I think he's just straight strange.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, just we're probably way reading into things
I think
that have no reason at all.
I mean, the level of Jeffrey Dahmer's mental illness, I think we're overthinking.
Yes. There's no way for us to be right where his mind is to understand what his thought process would be.
Nope.
Yeah. But a lot of people said the same thing was going on. And Christopher specifically in his interview with the New York Post said he crossed the line with some people. Prisoners, prison staff, some people who are in prison are repentant, but he was not one of them. So sometimes this would lead to heated interactions with other inmates, but his personal guard was always around to protect him. On one occasion, the corrections officers were just far away enough to where they weren't able to protect Dahmer. While the guards were briefly occupied, a fellow inmate named Osvaldo Durruti attempted to slash Dahmer's neck with a razor. And he was injured, but he was able to make a quick recovery. So he returned to Gen Pop and resumed his normal, everyday chicken nugget activities.
I'm surprised that chicken nuggets. I'm surprised that they didn't pull him out of general population and just make the decision for him.
After that incident, It does seem a little strange.
And I was about to say, well, you can't tell people what to do. But I'm like, this is prison. You could chain them to something and be like, stay there. And it's legal. Like, what do you mean? No, you tell them what to do. Like, it's unsafe for the rest of the population.
Yeah, I mean, he had made the decision before to come out of solitary, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to carry over forever. If there's an attempt on his life, it only seems natural to at least put him back in solitary temporarily. So I don't know why that happened.
Okay. you're a murderer. Murder excites you. Does it necessarily matter what direction that the possibility of murder is coming from? Even if it's maybe your murder, that's exciting, possibly. Maybe it's more exciting, because he said he was getting restless, right? To be in general population with the possibility that you could be faced with the thing that just gets you going. Maybe? Am I reading into it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe.
It's hard because it's like, I mean,
sure,
I want to guess at what he was thinking, but it's just, we don't really know who made the decision and why. But it does seem really strange.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to be like, oh, I know someone tried to kill you last week, but let's give him another chance, you know? And for you as the person that's the target to say, oh yeah, let me give them another chance. Nowhere does it make a lot of sense to make that decision.
I don't get it.
So when he came back into Gen Pop, Christopher Scarver was not very concerned about Dahmer still, and he just didn't pay attention to him, according to him. It did bother Chris that Dahmer didn't seem to feel bad about what he had done, but he didn't really want to go out of his way to confront him about it like everyone else. So he just tried to keep his distance, and he said they never really interacted at all. But he was clearly upset that Dahmer didn't seem to regret all the like senseless violence and taking of lives.
Sure.
He would see Dahmer around and he would keep an eye on him from across the prison yard, but he thought it would be best to not interact with him so he could basically stay off his radar.
I don't know about that.
Yeah?
He's watching him from across the prison yard. He's across the prison yard. You're okay. You're safe. You don't need to be concerned. You're watching him.
Yeah, but like
I think he was interested. Because if nothing else, that's the guy you've been watching on TV right there.
Well, yeah, and I think that he's admitting that, you know what I mean? I think he's saying like, aside from the kind of true crime celebrity status that he had and just making a mental note of like, yeah, that guy's on the same yard as me. I'm not going to go out of my way to walk up to him and say, I know who you are. I know what you did. Because I don't want him to know who I am. That's what he's saying. It's like, yeah, I'm aware of him. The same way that, you know, you and I are in LA. If we're in the same place as a celebrity, I'm going to make a mental note of that celebrity that's sitting in the same restaurant as me. I'm not going to go up and like nerd out on them and make it awkward. But I'm certainly going to be aware that that person is there, you know?
You don't do that?
No, I don't.
That's so weird. Must be the only one. I went and sat at Rodney Bingenheimer's table with him at Canner's. Excuse me, I need to have a seat.
But that's the thing is, I think what is being pointed out here is that most people do go up and they're like, hey, I know who you are. Whether that's some people in prison probably were like, yeah, not necessarily that I respect you, but I'm kind of want to be adjacent to your celebrity status, right?
Yeah.
And others are angry with him. And then there's people like Christopher that are just like, I'm going to let you go about your business. I see you, but we're not going to have any interaction. I think that's the stance he was taking, you know?
Okay.
You're so not buying it.
I still kind of feel like, yeah, okay, you know what? Okay, you've changed my mind. Because this is a person who has delusional thoughts as well. So we can't necessarily hone in on any specific thing, but I just feel like, you know, you're watching this person. Like, you've already said you got issues with what he did. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to tell the New York Post, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were watching him. I don't know. We'll see. No, we won't, but I don't know.
But I also think, you know, for someone like Christopher that has experienced a lot of racism and clearly is deeply affected by that and knows that Dahmer had a racial element to his crimes, I'm probably going to keep an eye on that person and make sure that you don't keep an eye on me, right?
Right.
That's the thing that makes a lot of sense to me is like the way he's describing it as being aware, you know, extrapolate for your own personal safety and also not call attention to yourself for your own personal safety.
I didn't even think about it in the sense that maybe Christopher, like, not that Jeffrey's going to do anything to him, but like scared because I get it now. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you just...
But yeah, it's like, oh, wait, this guy, there was like a racial tone to it. I'm black. Like, okay, I'm going to make, I'm seeing him, but I'm not paying attention. I don't want to be on his radar. Ding, ding, ding. Sorry.
Yeah,
this last 20 minutes.
That's what I picked up on when he was saying that and kind of explaining his interactions with Dahmer and how distant he was, but his awareness. All that to me boils down to he knows that, race is such a huge issue in his life. And on top of that, for Dahmer's crimes, he doesn't want to be the person that's targeted, That's how I took it.
I get it now.
Makes sense?
I get how you took it. Completely.
I probably didn't do the best of explaining that.
No, it's fine. It just took me like 30 minutes of a 45-minute episode.
No, it's okay. It was 20 of those minutes was me not explaining my point well.
Perfect.
So, yeah, he would keep an eye on him, but they didn't really talk and he never really approached him. And that seems to be for his own self-preservation. Until November 28th, 1994, when Christopher interacted with Jeffrey Dahmer for the very first time. Chris was given the job of cleaning the prison gym along with Dahmer and a third inmate, 37-year-old Jesse Anderson. Corrections officers escorted the trio back to the gym and gave them supplies, and then they left them alone for a little while. One of the first tasks that they had to complete was to mop the floors. So they each grabbed a mop and filled a bucket with water. While the three of them were filling up the buckets, someone poked Christopher in the back with their mop handle. And he wasn't sure if it was Jesse or Jeffrey who'd done it, but he turned around and tried to see who it was, and he found that they were just snickering at him.
Not good.
No. Christopher was extremely angry and said, quote, "I turned around and Dahmer and Anderson were kind of laughing under their breath. I looked right into their eyes and I couldn't tell which one had done it." So the three of them went their separate ways to begin mopping different areas, and Christopher watched Jeffrey go into the staff locker room. Chris went into the weight room and he found a piece of exercise equipment that he could remove a metal piece from that was shaped like a pipe. He took a 20-inch metal bar from the weight room and followed Jeffrey into the staff locker room. Christopher cornered Dahmer inside the staff locker room and pulled out a newspaper clipping that he had been keeping in his pocket. And that's the part where it's...
the part where I was right all along.
It's the part where Courtney steps in and she's like, "Told you so."
She just goes, "Excuse me." Excuse me, everyone. I mean, keep going. Sorry.
It does definitely make it seem like he had more awareness, more resentment, more of a target for Jeffrey than he was making it seem. But again, you could also argue that he was the only celebrity in the entire jail. You might have a news clipping on there because you're like, "Hey, I'm in jail with this celebrity."
For all the people you're going to see, that you want to show it to them. All the people visiting you.
Yeah, it's strange behavior at the very least.
Yeah, and it calls bullshit on everything he said.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Chris says, "I asked him if he did those things in the paper because I was fiercely disgusted." Dahmer saw that he also had a weapon that looked like a pipe, so he knew immediately that he wasn't safe. Chris says that he started to look for a door, but he came after Dahmer with the pipe and smashed his head repeatedly, and then bashed his head into a wall.
It's wild because, again, Jeffrey Dahmer is like 6'4". Like, these are two huge people fighting with this metal pipe. Like, it is brutal. This is just brutality.
It's a very gruesome, gruesome scene. It's a gruesome act of violence. Christopher later said, quote, "He ended up dead. I put his head down."
Ugh. Ugh, right?
Yeah, he's disturbing.
Yeah, he's very descriptive in a lot of ways too. That's an interesting way to describe things.
Right.
I put his head down.
Chris then casually walked across the gym and went into the locker room where the third inmate, Jesse Anderson, was. So although Jesse's crimes may have been lesser known than Dahmer's, he also had made a lot of enemies since coming to prison in 1992. Jesse Anderson had killed his wife in the parking lot of a shopping mall, and he actually tried to frame 2 black men for the murder.
Not good.
Other inmates were aware that he was racist. It was pretty well known. And he earned even more enemies when he defaced a portrait of Martin Luther King inside the prison.
Even worse.
So I always have to come back to the racial element for him. And I think it had to be an aspect in him having a grudge with Dahmer and obviously with Anderson.
Yes. And also, what in the world are they putting all 3 of these people together for? Like, these are the 3. I mean, I guess when you're like, what's your pool to choose from? But specifically, I mean, that just seems wild and crazy to me. But
right. If they try and keep the different populations under control, knowing that there's racial tensions, knowing that there's violence between different groups, between different gangs, whatever it may be, you would think that they'd have a little bit more oversight about these 3 inmates being together. 2 white people with racial aspects to their crime and a black man with also a racial element to his crime. You know, it just seems like an unbelievably stupid oversight for the corrections officers. And on top of that, nobody's supervising them. You could have put an officer there and they didn't.
Yeah.
It's a bad call. So Christopher decided that he should come after Jesse as well. So he looked around to make sure that there weren't any guards in the area. He approached Jesse Anderson and struck him multiple times with the 20-inch bar, just like he had done to Jeffrey. When Christopher returned to his cell early, an officer asked him why he wasn't still working on cleaning the gym. Chris responded, "God told me to do it. You'll hear about it on the 6 o'clock news. Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead."
It's like, I have this visual of him just, knowing it's all over and just walking in and just dropping the bar and just, it'll be on the news. They're dead, right? It's a movie.
It does seem like a lot of dramatics.
It's like Shawshank or The Wire, right? It's just, it's a movie to me. It's very, very dramatic.
It's extremely difficult to apply logic to this case.
Yeah, you can't.
I just want to interpret a lot of these actions and think about how in control he was or, what his delusions may have been telling him versus him making a conscious decision based on, wanting to hold racists accountable possibly. I don't know, but we have no idea. And what he's telling us doesn't make any sense, There's a lot of quotes. There's a lot of information in his New York Post interview, but is it necessarily the most accurate? We don't know.
Well, no, but he says again, he says that that it's okay that we did this because they weren't sorry. They weren't repentant. That's like the common thing. He wants you to feel sorry for what you did.
Yeah, he seems really intent on being the instrument of justice for people.
It's him he's the one deciding who's, worth it or not, or just.
Absolutely. It's the same thing with his original crime. He is in jail because he wanted to hold people accountable for discriminating against him at the workplace. That's his reasoning for his act of violence was justice. But now he's going to carry that on into his behavior behind bars.
It's like he thinks he's the one that, like, there's some people that think that it's their job to teach people what, is socially acceptable or whatever. It's like he wants people to feel bad for what they've done. And so if you don't, well, it's coming down on you today. Like if you don't feel badly about something, he's going to teach you, why you should feel badly.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not up to you, man.
Right. It's a miserable way to live. While one corrections officer was asking Chris why he wasn't still working, 2 other guards found Jeffrey and Jesse in the locker room. Their faces were severely disfigured, so it wasn't immediately clear who they had just found. Medical staff tried to help, but it was too late, and Jeffrey Dahmer was pronounced dead at 9:11 a.m. Jesse Anderson was gravely injured, but he lived through the attack. 2 days later, he succumbed to his severe injuries.
I doubt they were able to ask him any questions. Like, I'm sure he was taken to the hospital unconscious.
Right. It doesn't seem like he was able to give much information.
Yeah.
Many people, including both inmates and corrections officers, questioned why the 3 men had been left alone that day, especially long enough for all of that to happen without detection. It's one thing to turn your back for 1 second. It's another to completely leave them alone.
Especially on an inmate that formerly was in solitary and couldn't go anywhere without a guard.
Right. Inmates came forward to reveal that guards, quote, never left the area where the murder happened. But on that particular day, they mysteriously vanished for a long time. Christopher even claimed that prison staff had left him alone with Dahmer because they wanted Chris to harm him.
That's possible.
I think it's just another thing that he's just telling himself, to
agree.
make himself feel justified.
I agree, but, there could be like 1 or 2 guards that just have their own
agenda.
Shit
they have
going
it out
on
for him.
Yeah, I don't think that's what happened, but hey.
But if you're there in the thick of it every day, maybe you develop that sort of theory. Chris claimed that the staff knew he was unstable.
The Starlight Lounge presents An Evening with the Progressive Box.
Old moon, yeah. That's Hugo, tickling the ivories. He just saved by bundling home and auto with Progressive. Gonna finally buy a ring for that gal of yours, Hugo? Send her my condolences. Hi-oh! This next one's for you two. There's a burglar in my heart. Thank you.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
Incapable of violence. He also said that he has since found that certain foods cause him to have a psychotic break, and he now avoids bread and refined sugar because they are the main culprits.
That sounds like a delusion. Unless it's like a gluten-free thing I don't understand.
Well, I think that...
Will certain foods make you like, what?
I'm actually kind of with him on this in the sense that whatever dietary things that you find help you, that's not for me to say. There's plenty of people that have health issues that are vastly improved by avoiding certain foods. But as far as like a specific interaction with his drugs, I don't think it's that. I just think that maybe he's at his most mentally healthy when he avoids certain things.
That's fine. But do certain foods cause you to have a psychotic break? Like that to me sounds like it's kind of a delusion that like you believe it. So of course it happens. It's like Andrew Goldstein, the case before, he believed he was 7 inches tall. So that's what he thinks. So that's what it is.
I definitely don't think
that.
of it as a delusion. I do think of it as just a tactic for him to be the most like mentally well.
Okay.
But
a technique.
He's not going to have a psychotic break. That's the part where it's like saying that you're having a candy bar and you have a psychotic break.
This is what I mean.
I don't think that that's what he's saying.
Okay.
I just think that he knows now a little bit more about what causes him emotional distress. And sugar, for a lot of people, is really something that fucks with their health.
Okay.
And their mental well-being, But of course, we've got this extra icing on the cake for his violence and stuff like that. So it's like, I want to definitely be on your side and be like, yeah, fuck you. Don't blame it on sugar. Like, you did what you did, you know? But the other side of me is just like, well, in order to make this not happen again, yeah, find those things
Whatever it
that
takes.
help you be more stable.
Yeah.
You know, so like, I'm totally with you on just like, yeah, fuck you. Don't blame things. Take responsibility. He's complaining about Dahmer and Anderson not taking responsibility for their crimes and not being repentant. And then he's blaming sugar.
Yes.
So that's hypocrisy. That's a problem. I get it. But also it's like, whatever you can do to get better and never do this again, fucking do that. It's your responsibility to change your behavior.
With it. Got it. Thank you.
But I agree with you. It's like, yeah, come on. I'm smarter than that.
Yeah, come on.
But yeah, I don't think it could be categorized necessarily as a delusion. It's different than the guy that thinks he's 7 inches tall.
Okay, just checking.
So he said that the fact that the guards disappeared right before the incident meant that they had something to do with what took place. Chris refused to elaborate over fear of revenge and legal consequences. He said, quote, "I would need a good attorney to ensure there would not be any retaliation by Wisconsin officials or to get me out of any type of retaliatory position that they would put me in."
Let's get one.
Right?
Okay.
Like, let's figure out what really happened here.
I'm sure there's some really good, quote unquote, really good attorney out there who'd be like, all right, I'll take this case. Anyway.
An investigation concluded that Christopher had acted alone. Scarver initially pleaded insanity to the murders, but later changed it to no contest in exchange for a transfer to a federal penitentiary.
I see.
He was sentenced to 2 life terms on top of the life sentence that he was already serving. After the murders, Chris was sent to solitary confinement for 16 months. That's a long time.
Yeah, that's keeping everyone else safe and punishing him.
Yeah. 5 years of his sentence were spent in federal prison at Florence, where he was able to thrive. He was given audio tapes to help kind of quiet the voices in his head and a job assignment to keep him busy. He was also allowed daily contact with other inmates in the prison recreation yard. And he didn't have any other incidents of violence during this time period.
Sounds like he got into a routine, probably right meds. It honestly, though, because there's a lot of things, it sounds like his schizophrenia got worse as he got older, but yes, it's maintained, it's controlled. Like whether it's, he's not eating dairy, he's not eating sweets, whatever it is working.
Yeah.
So we're going to go with it. And this was in the federal penitentiary. So let's keep him there, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. All these things that he was using to help his condition and help him be as healthy as possible, I think that this particular facility was all on board with that. If it takes a radio or a certain amount of time or outdoors job, I don't know, sugar avoidance, just do it so that you can not have any other incidents,
Absolutely.
It's best for the entire population and the overall institution that you make it a healthy environment and help the inmate do those things that keep them healthy.
Yeah, he's very affected by his environment.
Yeah.
He seems like one of those people.
After 5 years where he was doing really well, he was then transferred to a much more strict and oppressive facility. In 2005, Chris filed a civil suit against officials of the Wisconsin Secure Program facility, where he alleged that he had been subjected to cruel and unusual punishment in violation of his constitutional rights. The suit specifically stated that, quote, "conditions at Supermax are so severe and restrictive that they exacerbate the symptoms that mentally ill inmates exhibit." And that, quote, "many of the severe conditions serve no legitimate penological interest. They can only be considered punishment for punishment's sake."
That's not helping anybody.
The amount of incidents that you gotta have when you're treating your inmates like that It's awful.
If it's more, rehabilitation focused, come on. Like, it just seems so obvious.
It's just barbaric the way that some of these facilities are operating. We're definitely going to dive more into that. That is one of the plans for doing letter J for Jailhouse murders.
Once you start looking at these and you see what, it's like, oh, well, they're in jail. It's supposed to be miserable. Sure. Got it. Point taken. However, this is, honestly, it's like Auschwitz stuff. It's like really bizarre treatment that nobody should have. I don't care. No, you're human. Like, stop.
Exactly. It's just basic human rights.
Yeah.
And it's very brutal. So it's clear there's a couple facilities that he attended that were fine. And then once he's in an environment like this, everything deteriorates. And he's not the only inmate that's being subjected to this. Among the issues addressed, the suit pointed to lack of AC or windows that made medication side effects worse, long hours of fluorescent lighting that exacerbate mental health issues, and no access to electronics like TV, radio, or even a watch, which have been shown to help inmates that are struggling with their mental health.
Side note, the fluorescent lighting thing is also an epilepsy trigger for some people. So you're in there, right? And maybe you have epilepsy or whatever. Seizures, rampant, depending on the person.
During the difficult period at the facility named in the civil suit, Chris attempted suicide 3 times. Once by taking an overdose of his antipsychotic pills, another by slitting his wrist, and a 3rd time by swallowing a large number of Tylenol tablets. There were several incidents where he banged his head against the cell wall for prolonged periods of time because he wanted to break his head open so that the voices could escape.
He is suffering.
It's so sad. Christopher also cut his head with a razor and told his psychiatrist that he was trying to cut out whoever was talking and moving around inside his head. A district court dismissed the suit and determined that the issues described were not considered unlawful.
Of course they aren't. This is the problem is, for example, the Shawshank Redemption, right? Like, that's what this is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be horrible. It's supposed to be miserable. But how miserable are you supposed to be? And when you're not focused on rehabilitation and just punishment, he's not wrong here.
Yeah, it just blows my mind that this is okay legally, that a judge is going to say, yeah, this could be the kind of situation that's okay for us to do to people because they deserve it, is what the decision is saying. Like, you deserve to be punished this severely and in a horrific condition.
I'll tell you how you can understand. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, he would make this decision. Right? It's just, there's certain people that I feel like they don't look at prisoners as people. It's a job, and these are my numbers. And so, yeah, it's really easy to be like, send that number back. I don't care what that number says. Yeah, okay, he needs a radio. Great. I didn't have a radio when I was 5. Whatever. You put it however you want, but it's just a number.
Yeah.
Not a person.
It's just so heartbreaking because
and he's a weak person because he has mental illness, right? So it's like, somebody, do we even want to spend this time anyway? Right? There's a lot. I can't wait to get into more Jailhouse stuff.
Yeah, it's just really sad. It's sad that the system doesn't treat human beings as humans. It's really, this kind of decision makes it clear that they're treating them as pests, as vermin, and it's okay to just brutalize them. And that's just so heartbreaking that our prison system does that and then stands by its decision when it's called out. When someone's trying to hold them accountable and say that this isn't right, they're like, oh no, but we stand by that.
And this is 15 years since he murdered them. So like, his mental state has just gotten worse and worse.
Yeah, it's progressed
15 years
a lot.
later, yeah.
Scarver unsuccessfully tried to appeal the decision in 2006. Although he didn't win the civil suit, a federal district court judge named Barbara Crabb did order that Christopher and about 40 other inmates should be relocated to a facility that had better care for inmates with serious mental health challenges. I'm glad at least something was done. And obviously it was a big enough problem to where a bunch of the inmates that had severe mental health issues, it seemed warranted to transfer them.
I would bet that the way that this came about was that multiple people or multiple inmates with attorneys came to them and were like, listen, I've got all these people with me. This is what's going on. Like, you have a problem with the way that you're treating the mentally ill in your facility. These are all the people to tell you why. Here's their attorneys as well. We're all filing appeals. We're taking you to task. This is bullshit. Calling them out. And then finally it's like, okay, we got to do something. We've got 40 inmates and attorney, right? I imagine. Thank God she did do something, but usually it takes something like that to make a change.
Yeah, you're right. Usually if it's one person, they're not going to listen. But then if you see it's a big PR issue, if it's getting a lot of media attention, that may have been the catalyst for more accountability. But whatever it took, I'm really grateful that they got some change so that they could be in a facility that's not actively harming them. Chris was relocated to the Sentinel Correctional Facility in Cannon City, Colorado, where he made significant improvements. In 2012, an agent representing Christopher announced that he would be open to writing a tell-all book about the murder. Christopher has found an outlet in writing poetry, and he even published a book in 2015 titled God's Seed, Poetry of Christopher J. Scarver. An Amazon summary describes it as, quote, a poetic vision of the world as seen through prison walls. Christopher's poetry describes his journey from despair to hope, from mistrust to finding the good in others.
I'm pretty sure Christopher wasn't looking for an agent. It's so ridiculous to me. Like, going to this guy and just being like, oh yeah, write the tell-all. Right. And like, obviously, I would bet you they tried and it was just nonsense and they couldn't. So then they're like, we'll just do a book of poetry. Right.
Yeah, maybe.
That tell-all would have been something. Right. But obviously that it wasn't going to happen. But at least he gets some. No, he can't make money off of this. Never mind.
No.
I was like, maybe he gets money from the Amazon.
He hopes to take mechanical and electrical engineering classes while behind bars. So if you remember, Christopher also had a girlfriend that was pregnant around the times that the murders occurred. And of course, when he went to jail, she raised the son on her own. Christopher's son, who was born around the same time as the crime, has kept in touch with his father via letters. Chris encouraged him to study hard and stay busy playing basketball. And his son did really well in school and graduated with a degree in sociology from Bethany Lutheran College. He was given a 2-year scholarship from the University of Wisconsin and received financial support from the Creative Corrections Education Foundation, which specifically helps students whose parents are criminals serving sentences.
I think that's pretty great.
Yeah.
What a lovely outcome from something that did not start that way.
I absolutely wanted to make sure that that information was included because I hate ending on an awful, sad note. And it really makes me feel good that there's an organization out there trying to help the children. Like, we always talk about the people that are victims and the people that are secondary victims, the family members, the survivors, the people that witnessed it and have trauma. There's so many additional victims on top of the person that lost their life. And so for him, being the child that's born into this situation, I'm so grateful to see that there's an organization out there to help him, to provide him with resources that may have been lacking.
We cover a ton of stories where the parents are in prison, go to prison, what have you. They do not end with the kids getting full ride scholarships and like taking them and doing something with their life. And he gets a sociology degree. So he might be like a social worker or something really, you know, like helping people out there. And it says a lot about the single mother that raised him.
Yeah.
Really does.
Yeah.
And also she was smart enough to know like, hey kid, there's grants for this stuff, right? Or somebody in school, in like high school said, hey, you know, you might qualify for this. Like, check it out. But it doesn't matter. There was somebody there to help him out.
Yeah.
And I think that's just really cool because a lot of times like people just, anything prison related, they just like flush you down the toilet. You know, like, oh, can't be helped.
Yeah,
like,
that's
that's not
so
true.
sad to see that happen. And it does speak volumes about the type of person his son is and the type of person that their mother is, that they have the kind of family support. They have people telling them to just do well and push to get like good grades and stay dedicated to sports and then seek out scholarships and try and get help so you can like move forward. That's awesome.
And he's keeping in touch with him while he was in prison. So he's writing him the whole time and everything. And I'd imagine probably before and after the murders. Because, well, no, wait. The timeline doesn't work. So it would be after. But still, he's encouraged to have a relationship. And this person puts themselves out there to the point where, like, maybe my dad can benefit from having a relationship with me. Because a lot of people, the guilt kills you, right? But he's there. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's it for Christopher Scarver for our first jailhouse murder.
This is so much deeper than Jeffrey Dahmer.
There's so many different ways to look at this. There's a lot of unpacking of mental health and the racial issues and what was going on with our prison system. I mean, it's just a very interesting case, and there's a lot to be learned from and a lot of lessons, I think.
I agree.
So we're going to be back next week with another jailhouse murder. And like I said, we're going to come at it from a few different angles, and we're going to make sure that we approach a few different kind of cases so we can see different examples of what happens behind bars. And in the meantime, if you want to read more about this particular case, I would definitely recommend the New York Post article. We're going to put links in the show notes. So if you want to check that out, there's also some information on HuffPo and the Independent UK. So definitely check those out. Those links are in our show notes. And if you aren't following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, definitely go over there and follow us.
Threadless, beach towels. What else? What else do we got here?
We're also going to be recording a new Patreon pretty soon coming up. So we want to put out another really interesting case for you.
That one just fell right in our lap too.
If you're not on our Patreon, definitely go over there and check that out. It's patreon.com/Murder Dictionary Podcast. And we want to say thank you to our new patrons for this week, Rick, Cleo, Laurel, Caroline, and Nick.
Thank you so much.
So thanks, you guys. We hope that you guys have a better idea of the cases on our Patreon from the episode that we posted last week. So that was the idea, so that you guys can know the kind of bonus material that's on there. So definitely check out our Patreon. Cool?
Sounds good.
And we will be back next week with another jailhouse murder. We hope you guys have a great week. We will see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Introducing the Capital One Walmart Rewards Card. Earn unlimited 5% back on everything you buy at Walmart online. It's the perfect card for all your family's hints this holiday season. Like 5% back on the air fryer Grandpa told you about when he fell asleep in his chair.
They don't fry anything.
Or 5% back on the laptop your sister had carolers sing to you.
2 turtle doves and a laptop for Carrie.
The Capital One Walmart Rewards Card. Earn unlimited rewards, including 5% back at Walmart Online. What's in your wallet?
Terms and exclusions apply. Capital One N.A.
And now, an ad from Dad.
All right, save money on car insurance when you bundle home and auto with Progressive. Can I take these off? All right. What is this? This looks good. Wow, that's well made. Where did you get this? I'm talking to you with the hair. Yeah, where did you get this? It's good stuff. That's solid. That's not veneer, that's solid stuff.
Progressive can't save you from becoming your parents, but we can save you money when you bundle home and auto. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discounts not available in all states or situations.